Hey, everybody, welcome in. It is a mailbag edition of the Utopia Football Podcast, baby. That's right, mailbag on a Tuesday. Good to be with you. Sean Pendergast, one half of Payne and Pendergast Sports Radio 610, as we continue to roll on here through training camp, getting you ready for a joint practice on Thursday with the Rams, game on Saturday with the Texans backups against the Rams backups. Dreams will be made. Dreams will be shattered. Careers might be forged. It'll be a whole lot of fun on Saturday. A quick reminder, you can hear the game on Sports Radio 610 starting at noon. Texans Countdown starts at 9 a.m. outside the stadium. Appreciate so many of you who listen to the podcast stopping by and saying hello for the pregame. Really appreciate that. And mostly appreciate you guys listening to the podcast and supporting it, supporting me. It means a lot. And a reminder, if you haven't yet hit the subscribe button, please do so and give us a rating and a review. It all helps, man. It all helps as we head into this awesome Texans football season. We're going straight mailbag today. There's not a lot to get to, not a lot to get to with the Texans. They haven't practiced since the game on Saturday. They were off on Sunday. They did, I think, just walkthroughs or film work yesterday. The Texans used They used food, the best bait possible, to get media to go to the stadium for D'Amico Ryan's press conference. They unveiled all the new food options at NRG Stadium for the media to eat, and then there was a press conference afterwards with D'Amico Ryans and Nico Collins, Dalton Schultz, Kamari Lassiter. I did not go. I don't like being full at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. It's not my deal. So I didn't go. I knew I'd watch the press conferences on YouTube. I like to let the beat reporters all get their shit in with D'Amico Ryan, so to speak. So that's all we've had. No practice today on a Tuesday. They're back at it tomorrow, and then joint practice with the Rams on Thursday. So it's almost here, man. 2 weeks from Sunday, boom, regular season football. So excited about that. All right, so let's get straight to it. Mailbag. This is a thick mailbag, man. You guys are interested in the Texans. I love it. If I didn't get to your question and you emailed me, it's only because we have so many questions to get to. But continue, please, to email a reminder, HOU mailbag @gmail.com. I'll leave that down there at the bottom of the screen for those of you streaming on YouTube or wherever it is you're getting this podcast, if you're watching it on video. All right, let's get it cracking. John Burnett says, do you think that we try to stash a few players with small injuries on the IR and bring them back a little later in the season? Said that Noah Brown, he uses an example of that. Noah Brown's missed a lot of time. We'll get to Noah Brown in just a little bit. Here's what you need to know is that if you put somebody on injured reserve during the preseason, they're on injured reserve for the year. They're done for the season. So you have to be eligible to get called back from IR, you have to be on the 53-man roster to start the year. So Noah Brown, who's missed a bunch of time with a shoulder injury, missed a lot of time last year too with various ailments, he would have to be on the 53. And then at that point, sure, put him on injured reserve and bring him back at some point. There's only 8. You can only do that 8 times during the season. So it's not an unlimited thing. It's not all you can eat when it comes to this. So they've got to be on the roster, the 53, once they get to the cut down, to be eligible to get called back off of IR. You got to be on the 53-man roster to start the season. So it's not just as easy as, hey, let's put Noah Brown on IR and then we'll get our 53 and then we can start calling guys back, because then teams would take advantage of that. Appreciate the question, John. Chuck in Denver thought I'd jump to the front of the line. He says, Chuck, second in line behind John Burnett. Close. I said, watching Hard Knocks, they were brilliant to include all those Chicago Bears clips from the past in the intro. But could they possibly build that intro? How could they possibly build that intro without the Super Bowl shuffle? WTF. I haven't seen any of Hard Knocks yet. The training camp version. I watched the entire Giants offseason version. My wife and I did like a week and a half ago. Have not watched any of the Bears version of it. I guess episode 3 would be tonight. Yeah, man, the Super Bowl shuffle. Iconic. Go find it, kids. It's on YouTube, I'm sure. Back to the Texans, he says, the Cal revival started with the first cookout. If we're tracing the genesis of Cal's resurrection PR-wise to anything, is it the cookout? It's pretty good. They're cooking out this Thursday. I'm one of Cal's chefs. It's tradition. This is my 3rd year as one of his burger chefs. Says Hannah was who changed his image with the city. When she started showing up, he became a different person. I agree with that. Hannah's a big part of that. Chuck says, I'm not worried about Dameon Pierce anymore, except for the open to Payne and Pendergast. What do you do if he's gone? It's so funny how many people have asked me that. If you're not up at 6 a.m. listening to the open to Payne and Pendergast, we've got a few cuts in there that cut through. And one of them is Dameon Pierce saying, we're coming to H-Town. Let's get the work in, man. Let's go. And yeah, I don't know, man. If Damien's not a Texan anymore, we might have to tweak that. Now, D'Amico Ryans, his great day. Oh, give me some juice, baby. That'll stay in the open forever, I think. But we'll figure that out. Last one from Chuck. Let's talk secondary. Everyone's lauding Kalen Bullock at safety. Jalen Petrie is playing nickel. Kamari is playing opposite Sting. Ward also at safety. Besides Ward, that's a very young crew. Exciting but terrifying. So I guess no real question there. But I look, it's young, but I mean, are we terrified about Derek Stingley being out there? He was one of the best corners in football last year. Jalen Petrie's had a good camp. He had a good game against the Giants. I can see that where Petrie, Kalen Bullock, I think Jimmy Ward is what ties it all together. And Kamari Lassiter plays above his age. Jimmy Ward's the key, though. I think you highlight something. You highlight a good point, Chuck, which is Jimmy Ward's got to stay healthy this year. He's a big leader in that secondary. And D'Amico Ryans himself said it. He's the guy that kind of ties everything together back there. He's the brains of the operation. So I think the terrifying part would be Jimmy Ward had 3 different injuries last year. So it's a good point. Love the pod and the show. Keep it up. Chuck, I appreciate you very much. All right. Lorenzo gets into the mailbag. With all these additions to the team and the production from last year, it feels like the atmosphere around the Texans is better than it was when Kubiak was coach around 2011 and 2012. One of my all-time favorite players from those years, besides Andre Johnson, was Brian Cushing. He might not have had a Hall of Fame career, but his presence was always felt, whether he was on the field or missing because of injury. He was a tone setter and attitude for the defense. With that in mind, and with you being at all these practices, does anyone jump out to you that fills that role on the team this year? I think Jimmy Ward for sure. He's been doing that for a couple of years. But I think if anybody is filling that Cushing role, the easiest one to say is Azeez Al-Shire, the middle linebacker, 100%. He is like D'Amico Ryans kind of reincarnated on that defense. And I thought Al-Shire had some great quotes in an article that DJ Bieneme did for ESPN.com, where he just talked about, man, the Texans experience is not for everybody. Can't be soft. And I'm paraphrasing here. I don't have the quote in front of me. I probably should have pulled it when I pulled this question. But the bottom line for Azeez Al-Shire was either, hey, man, either get on board or get lost if you're not of the mindset. Will Anderson's talked about that too, man. Like, it's not for everybody. Not everybody can be a Houston Texan. How cool is that to hear about your football team, Texan fans, that you got guys in the building there that want to be here for a long, long time. And they're saying that, hey, man, this is a club. Like, you gotta show some mettle to get in here. We're not going to haze you. We're not going to tape your butt cheeks together or anything like that. You just got to show that you're ready to swarm and hit people and be all about ball. And I think that's really cool to see. So I think undoubtedly, I think Texan fans would agree. I think any of my media compadres who've been at Texans practices would agree. The correct answer to that question is Azeez Al-Shire. Appreciate the question, Lorenzo. Pamela emails in. Love the female representation. Pamela, shout out to you for being female. Unless you're a male with one of the strangest names ever. I've noticed Will Anderson has been sidelined to camp with an ankle issue. I'm concerned that this is a recurring problem from last year. Probably the old nurse in me. Can you shed some light on this? I cannot. Will has not done media since he's been missing all these practices. The team is never going to answer exactly what the issue is. This is, and before I give you my take on it, I have the same concern you do. I've brought that up on Payne and Pendergast and on the post-game show, I think, maybe pregame this week with Seth, that I'd like to know if this ankle injury for Will Anderson is somehow tied to the ankle injury that knocked him out of a couple of games and really hindered him at the end of last year. I say hindered him. He still played really well, but he was not 100% in those games. I don't need a Steph Curry thing going on. Basketball fans will remember Steph Curry did not become Steph Curry, greatest shooter on earth and perennial all-star, until he had his ankles cured somehow. I don't know if it was Mr. Miyagi doing the rubbing the hands and rubbing. It was Pat Morita even alive at that point. I don't know. By the way, the new season of Cobra Kai, thumbs up. Binge watched it the other night. back to Will Anderson. Yeah, that's a concern. Is it the same ankle? Is it just an aggravation of it? This is what I can say that I've seen from Will Anderson. He's working out on the side field at practice. He looks good. He's moving fine. All those guys working out on a side field all seem like they would be able to play if this were a regular season game coming up against the Rams. And I would have said the same thing before the Giants game. The only one that right now of all those injured guys it's concerning me is Christian Harris, because he's practiced once and he couldn't make it through one practice, and he's never out there working out. He's in the building all the time. But I'm cautiously optimistic that this Will Anderson thing is just an isolated injury and it happens to be an ankle again. Will seems to be in really good spirits when he's out of practice too, like joking with the media. But I feel like Will's in good spirits all the time. Like literally, I feel like Will Anderson could be on fire, literally lit on fire, and he'd have a big smile on his face laughing about how hot it is. You know, like that's just Will Anderson. He's got the greatest attitude of any human being on the planet. I hope that helps, Pamela. Like I'm just telling you what my eyes have seen. Like he's working out. He looks good. He seems happy. Let's hope for the best. Fingers crossed. How about it? Let's cross fingers together. All right. Fletcher and Austin. Who is on the field in 2 wide receiver sets? Everybody. They're mixing and matching all kinds of 2 wide receiver sets right now. So sometimes it's Tank and Nico. Sometimes it's Diggs and Nico. Sometimes there's no. I don't think, when they're in too tight, they're in, either 21 personnel or 12 personnel, either 2 running backs or 2 tight ends with one of the other. It's all different. It's training camp. They're mixing and matching a whole lot of things. Has Jared Patterson taken a jump? He's looked good in camp. He's been fine. He won't start. Kenyon Green's back and Juice Scruggs is his center, but Jared Patterson, he might be the depth piece that I feel most good about or most comfortable with, just given the experience he had last year and the versatility that he has. Fletcher also asked in 2023, the Jaguars, Josh Allen, back then Josh Allen, and Trayvon Walker combined for 27.5 sacks. Do you think Danielle Hunter and Will Anderson could match that this season? How many do you project them to get respectively? Look, it's going to be hard for Danielle Hunter to replicate 16.5 sacks. Like those are rare seasons. I would put the number, I think Will's in line for double digits. I'd put Will like 11. I'll put Danielle at like 13 because they've got other guys that can get after the passer too. When Danico Autry's back out there, Derek Barnett's had a really good camp. I'll put the over-under at 24.5 for Danielle Hunter and Will Anderson, and I bet I'd get a ton of action on the over. Also asked, do you think Derek Stingley will make first-team All-Pro this year and allow us to forget Casario's 2022 draft day blunder? Sauce Gardner says hello. Is it a blunder anymore? Is it a blunder, Fletcher? Because Derek Stingley Jr. looks every bit the player Sauce Gardner is now. But health is the key. I get what you're saying, man. Health, Sauce Gardner's got a better body of work because he's been on the field. I think Stingley's peak, like the best version we've seen of Stingley and the things he can do, I don't know that there's many other corners on the planet that can do what Stingley does. He's got hands that are better than most wide receivers in the league. So will Stingley make first-team All-Pro this year? If he's healthy, he's got a great shot at it. There can only be 2 or 3 corners, so he'll be in that conversation. Sometimes those things have a lot to do with what the overall defense looks like. If you're a good corner on a bad team is going to have on a bad defense, I should say, is going to have a hard time making first-team All-Pro. But if he's healthy, I'll put myself out there and say that he makes it. Stingley's been their best defensive player in camp this year, among a lot of them. All right, Joe Q is in. My man, Joe Q. What's your confidence level in handicapping terms with respect to CJ's availability? Would you take an over on 15.5 starts? Would you take a money line of 17 starts at plus 150? Okay. I would not take 17 starts at plus 150. That means there's that equates out to like a 40% chance that he plays every game. I would stay away from that. Total 15.5. I would cautiously take the over, but those are really good numbers. Those are really good numbers. He started 15 last year. Last year would have been an under. So I might skew to the under in part because if anything happens to Titus Howard or Laramie Tunsil long-term, then you've got a rookie left tackle or right tackle out there. And Blake Fisher struggled a little bit. He had his good moments and bad moments against the Giants. I'm staying away on both of those, Joe Q. That's a good line. That's a good number. You got a good sports book. More free drinks in your sports book, Joe Q. How's that? So Second one from Joe Q. Do you believe, rather than simply speculate, that Davis Mills is being coached up by Bobby Slowick and that some of his failings in his first 2 years might be attributable to David Culley and Pep Hamilton, as well as the fact that he only played 14 games of college football? I think it's a combination of all those things. I think any quarterback was honestly, Culley, Pep, your wide receiver room was not great. I mean, you had a young Nico who couldn't stay healthy. You had Brandon Cooks who didn't really want to be here. You had Chris Conley and Chris Moore, and not a good offensive line, no running game, any number of things that it could have been. So I don't attribute it to just one thing with Davis Mills, and the inexperience of just 14 games of college football for sure. All of that said, Davis Mills is the backup quarterback for this team. Not only did Nick Caserio say it in his pregame interview with John Harris and confirm it, but I think Davis is at a better camp this season than he did last season. Clint Stoerner doesn't agree with me on that, and he probably has the more educated eye than I do. You know, what with him, being a backup quarterback in the NFL and everything. I just feel like Davis has looked a little more in command this camp than he did last year. And if push came to shove and they had to start somebody in place of C.J. Stroud, I would be willing to bet that this year it would be Davis Mills. All right. Joe Q, thanks, man. Thanks for everything. Brian in Iowa, a few weeks ago when we acquired Cam Akers, I asked for your thoughts on him versus Dameon Pierce. After watching practices in a few preseason games, I'm worried about Pierce even making the roster or being traded. As far as I can tell, he's a great dude, but I'm thinking Cam is a much better fit for this team. I'm also really impressed with Jawar Jordan and British Brooks in the last game. I'd like to know your thoughts on Pierce versus Akers and the rest of the backfield. I actually have a piece going up on the Houston Press on Wednesday, 5 teams that I would call if I were Nick Caserio to try to see if they're interested in Dameon Pierce. I'll get into who the 5 teams are in a second. And I'll just give you the 5 teams and you can read the article for my reasoning behind them. But the problem for Dameon Pierce is he looks exactly like he did last year. Nothing's being blocked great in front of him, but it's at least being blocked to the point where if you're a capable 1A tailback on an NFL team, which this team came into training camp viewing him as, you got to at least make 4 yards on one of the carries. He hasn't. His high carry this year is 3 yards, and he's had plenty of carries that are 0 or 1, or I think even a -1 in there. He just doesn't look confident or crisp. He looked lacking confidence on his kickoff return. I don't know if you guys remember the kickoff return he had in the Giants game where he almost stopped and paused when he got to all the bodies there. It's tough to watch because we love Dameon Pierce, but all the other running backs, a little like what Mechie was dealing with after the Pittsburgh game, where it felt like every other receiver had made a play in a preseason game. It felt like every other running back made a play in that game against the Giants. Jawar Jordan had 4 catches. British Brooks had 2 touchdowns. J.J. Taylor broke off a long run. Cam Akers has looked very much more like he should be the number 2 behind Joe Mixon and Dameon Pierce. So, yeah, this will be fascinating to see on a few levels. Does Nick make phone calls to teams about Pierce? I can't imagine that he's not doing that just to see what's out there. And then number 2, does Pierce play against the Rams? I mean, he's gotten treated this whole camp like he's one of the de facto starters. Didn't play in the Hall of Fame game. When he's healthy and out of practice and Mixon's not out there, he's the first tailback. There hasn't been a single juncture in this camp, both during games or practices, where Dameon Pierce hasn't been treated like the number 1 back after Joe Mixon. If he's playing in this preseason game against the Rams, he's fighting for his job. So that'll be a huge tell as to where this team sees Dameon Pierce. The 5 teams that I put in the article: Dallas, New Orleans, Rams. And they could just do like a Christian Vasquez trade where they just send him across the field at practice this weekend or down to the other locker room. And then Baltimore and Vegas. Go to HoustonPress.com to read my reasoning behind all of those. Chris in the ATL, my man. Sean, you find a discarded Gatorade cooler at NRG and out pops a genie with an H-Town logo cap and a T-shirt with Andre Johnson beating up Cortland Finnegan. He'll grant you 3 roster-setting wishes to the Texans to start the season. What wishes would you pick? Think in terms of players you want to make the roster, some potentially avoiding IR, starting position earned by who, etc. Okay, so roster building wishes for me. I'm gonna eliminate CJ Stroud from this. I'm gonna eliminate any of the obvious like Pro Bowl caliber players being healthy. I'm gonna keep this. How about we do this? I get wishes for anything having to do with the second and third layers of the depth chart. How's that sound, Chris? So my one wish would be that Mechie's game he had on Saturday against the Giants is real and that he makes the team. Not just because we love John Mechie and he beat cancer, but we don't know if Stephon Diggs is going to be on this team after this year. They're going to some guys they have to start to pay. So they're going to need guys on lesser contracts to kind of fill the void. And I know next year Mechie will be on the last year of his rookie deal, but that's 1 year at least, you know? So I would say Mechie's Giants game being a good catalyst for him being on the roster. I would say number 2, purely Notre Dame homerism. I want Kurt Hinish to make the team because he went to Notre Dame. He's an underdog story, and I don't want to see his rivalry with Toro fizzle out with him getting cut. You guys been watching this on social media? It's hysterical. Toro and Kurt Hinish having this thing going. So Kurt Hinish making the team would be number 2. And I would say number 3, oh boy, number 3 would be, I would say, man, because this roster feels so set and stacked right now. I can't believe I might not even use up all 3 of my wishes. I don't know if I feel strongly enough about, well, screw it, Damian. I hope Damian makes it. I hope Damian makes it, and I hope he deserves to make it. But other than that, like I don't know if I need wishes for any of the ones that are, established guys. And there's nobody I feel like strongly enough who's in jeopardy. Like the wide receiver room, I hope shakes out. I hope Mechie and Xavier Hutchinson both make the team. How's that? I'll throw that one in there too. I think I've used 4 wishes now, Chris. If I sit here long enough, I'll end up using 10 of them. But I hope Xavier Hutchinson makes it. I think he deserves to. I think he's had a good camp. He's done overall more than Mechie has. And so I hope they both make it. Mechie and Xavier Hutchinson. And again, that's a young, cheap wide receiver that could help if Stephon Diggs is only here for 1 year. Good question, though, Chris. France in the North. Sending an email in. After seeing Danielle Hunter in person during practice and the preseason game, what stands out most in comparison to what you knew of him prior? I'll be honest with you, that he's gigantic, that he looks like an alien. He's got super long arms and huge biceps. And like Danielle Hunter is a crazy freak. That's what, hi, Vanessa Richardson. Shout out to Vanessa Richardson. She's just dropping off a Gucci or Louis Vuitton bag in the hallway of my apartment. That's all. Happens all the time. I've got Charlie Heck coming over with a Lamborghini next. I'll text you in a little bit. Vanessa's my neighbor. She's hiding a Louis Vuitton bag in here. It's a long story. So France in the North. After seeing Danielle Hunter in person, that's right. Yeah, he's big. He's a freak. He's crazy big. It's wild. Just in his first step, holy cow, holy smokes. What is the process regarding naming captains for the team? You and Seth spoke earlier this year how you thought Azeez would be a captain this year. Do you know when that'll get decided? That usually gets decided like the week before the season. Last year they picked 4 captains. They were voted on by the team. I'm trying to remember who they were. Jimmy Ward, Steven Nelson was one of them. Jalen Petrie, might have been one more. CJ, I think, was one of them to start off with. And then they added like 3 more. I think they added John Weeks, and I think for special teams, and I think they added Will Anderson and maybe one other. The team votes on it. I think if I had to guess, I think Azeez Al-Shire for sure is going to be a captain. I think CJ Stroud for sure is going to be a captain. I would guess Will Anderson is going to be a captain. I would guess Stephon Diggs is going to be a captain for this team. I know that some of you may think that's crazy. I think it's a lock that Diggs is a captain for this team. That's 4 right there. They'll probably add Weeks again as a special teamer, maybe 2 other guys. So that's it. Yeah. Fronts in the North also asked better go-to breakfast in Houston, breakfast taco or kolache. Seen online, but we don't have those here. I would say I like them both. I think it depends on where you're going for them. I'm being honest, like those Shipley kolaches, those breakfast kolaches at Shipley are money. Really, really good. And I like the Kolache Factory too. Breakfast tacos good. I recommend Taquerias Arandas for that. I don't have a strong preference on breakfast taco or kolache. It's a mood thing to me. But as long as you're down here, like you can probably get breakfast tacos. I would imagine even up where you live in Toronto, you can throw some scrambled eggs onto a tortilla. Kolaches there's more of a process with them, and I like to outsource that and let other people do it, like Shipley's or the Kolache Factory. So I would go kolache while you're here. Fronts in the North. France is coming down for a game. JR and Spicewood. I love the young talent on the Astros and Texans. 2 of my favorite players are Kyle Tucker and Christian Harris. Wondering, this is a good one, JR. Wondering who you think I'll see playing games first. I'm going to go Tucker on that. I don't know what. I have no clue what this injury is with Christian Harris. I mean, I'm told it's a calf. But the fact that he came back in practice for not even a full practice, and then he was gone, not even after one practice. Like I have a hard time betting on Christian Harris with anything coming back right now. Whereas with Kyle Tucker, you're at least starting to see him take BP and working back towards that. It seems like he's had a few good days in a row. So yeah, I would say Kyle Tucker on that one. Mostly because he's actually got games over the next, like Christian Harris doesn't have a game until September the 8th. So he could feel fine, but what are they going to do? Have a pickup game so that I can win my bet with you, JR? So I would go Tucker for sure, just based on the availability of games he can actually play. JR says, how was your gummy experience? Any funny stories? Will you do it again? Yeah, I took edibles for the first time since we went to, part of our trip was to Colorado, me and Amy, back in July. So before we got to the Colorado-New Mexico border, there was a dispensary there, like 4 miles from the border. So I stopped in there and bought like 6 packs of gummies. Like they each have 10 in them. And I'll say this. I bought one brand. It was called Smokies or something like that. I don't feel much with those. They relax me a little bit. The other ones, and I don't have the brand name, I took a whole one of those. And man, I was out of my tree for the rest of the night. Like my thinking was super disjointed. Like thoughts in my head were jumping in front of other thoughts. It's really hard to describe. So one of them really fucked me up. The other one I feel like I almost need to take 1.5 just to get the effect. But I'll do it again. I liked it. I only do them on Friday and Saturday nights where I know I'm staying home. So I don't do them the nights before I have to get up for a show the next day, just because I don't know. I don't know how they'd affect me getting up at 4:15 in the morning. Whereas if I do it on a Friday or Saturday night where I don't have a show the next day, then I can sleep in, I can sleep it off, whatever you want to call it. So yeah, no, I'll do it again. I like the experience of it. Even the one I took that was strong, like I was super relaxed and I wasn't like walking out onto my balcony to go jump or anything like that, So it was cool, man. I liked it. I liked it a lot. But like, again, when I run out, I'm not going to be like figuring out which of my friends are going to Colorado to restock my supply. Like we got back a month ago and I've probably had a total of like 5 of them the whole time. So, that's kind of where I'm at with that. I must have talked about that on the podcast, huh? I guess I did. Charles Honeycutt, all the talk has been around if Mechie and Hutchinson are safe to make the roster. Could there be a possibility that Noah Brown isn't, since he's been MIA in the preseason? I think there is a possibility Noah Brown gets cut, but everybody I say that to thinks I'm crazy. He was banged up last year. Granted, I know he had some moments last year, and I love Noah Brown. Maybe Chris in the ATL, hey, I'll come back for another wish. How's that? Noah Brown gets healthy and makes the team because we love Noah Brown. How's that? And their wide receiver room is the big 3 plus Noah Brown, Xavier, Hutchinson, and Mechie. How's that? But I think he's in danger of not making it. He's not Randy Moss, he's Noah Brown. Like he's a solid receiver who's on a 1-year, $4 million deal. And they've got a lot of bodies in that room right now. So So I don't know. Like in my world, he would be in jeopardy right now, but there's a lot of people that think that's not the case. Charles says he's also turning 40 on Friday. I'm thinking about top things to do over the weekend. Planning to go to the Texans Rams game on Saturday. Any thoughts? I'll tell you what, I'm just going to use this as a general advice on like what like stuff to do. The Texans and the Rams game is a good one. I would say my number one thing to do, and I think it's the number one thing to do on TripAdvisor as well. If you all haven't been to the Music Box Theater over in City Center, go. It's the best. It's a group of 5 people, 2 married couples, and then a 5th woman. And they do covers of songs with some comedy woven into it. They're big sports fans, especially the 2 guys in the cast. Shout out to Brad and Luke. That is an easy go-to. Easy go-to, man. Music Box Theater. They're in City Center, so there's like a Brazilian steakhouse there. There's an Italian restaurant. There's all kinds of restaurants there. They're right across the street from Brio, which is an Italian restaurant. So you go there, you park in the garage. It's free to park. Go eat a nice dinner at one of the restaurants around there, and then go to Music Box Theater. They serve alcohol. You can buy bottles of wine. And it's awesome. They're funny. They're good. I've never had a bad time at the Music Box Theater. So, Charles, that's what I would tell you. Maybe Friday, go to the Music Box Theater, and then Saturday, go to the Texans game, and then see how you're feeling after the Texans game. If you're like me last Saturday, you're exhausted, but I had to do a pregame show on the surface of the sun and then do a postgame show. So I was a little tired, but if you're not tired, then go to Dino's on Richmond for karaoke night. How's that? Got you hooked up. You're basically living the Sean Pendergast reality tour. That's what you're doing. But yeah, I'm telling you, man, this is to all of you. Music Box Theater, baby. Good date night. Really good date night. All right. Jason in Leander. And I believe the website is the Music Box Theater. It's the one here in Houston. It's over at Queensbury Theater, over in City Center. Jason in Leander, who's become a frequent emailer to the podcast. Who would you bet on to lead the Texans in rushing yards at these odds, which I am completely making up? I love that, though. Mixon minus 175, Cam Akers plus 150, Field plus 200. I still think it's going to be Mixon, and I know he's missed a ton of time, but I think he's largely been healthy throughout camp, and they're just handling him with care. I think Mixon at minus 175, even though I hate laying that much with a favorite. Cam Akers, I just have a hard time picking somebody who's got 2 Achilles tears in the last few years, and the Field would mean somebody coming out of nowhere. I'll go Mixon minus 175. Other question from Jason: is Jack Bagwell a poor man's Jack Easterby? You're not the first one to espouse this, Jason, but he says, hear me out. Contributions as a player are unimpeachable, and that way he's nothing like Easterby, but put that aside. As an executive, nobody seems to know exactly what his role is. Whatever it is, nobody seems happy with it. Or am I overrating the Bagwell skepticism out there? Thanks for reading and caring, Jason says. And I do care about all of you. Here's the big difference with Easterby and Bagwell is that I think Easterby's contributions, input, whatever we want to call it, came from a place of him wanting to eventually run the whole show. I think Bagwell just wants what's best for the Astros, and that's it. Like, I don't think Bagwell is making decisions to try to somehow forward Jeff Bagwell. I think Jeff Bagwell cares about the Astros, and I know he was part of some really bad decisions, like really bad decisions. I mean, you could argue that the reason the Astros were so bad for the first month and a half of the season directly tied to Jose Abreu on this team, both from the malaise of having an underperformer on the roster and in the dugout like that to the just gigantic clogged up ball of turd and toilet paper in the pipe that he was in the bathroom pipe that was the Astros lineup. There's nothing you could do with the guy. He couldn't play another position. He couldn't DH because he can't hit. He's just sitting there at 6 or 7 in the lineup or 8 or whatever. And boom, just right there. Just an automatic out. When he got on base, there was no, at least when some of these guys who can't hit get on base, they can go steal a bag for you. Hell, Chaz last night, he's hit like me all year, gets a base hit and he goes and steals you a bag. Abreu, there's none of that. So I think that's the big difference with me or for me with Bagwell and Easterby is that there was a nefarious side to Jack Easterby. I don't think there is to Jeff Bagwell. I don't think he's qualified to be a GM. I don't think his view of baseball is current enough to be a good GM. Like when he's in the booth doing color commentary and he's either joking or serious about not knowing like what expected batting average and VORP or whatever, like all the different advanced stats. I think you need to at least have familiarity with them to run a front office these days. Good news. I think Dana Brown does have familiarity with them. Okay, we got a few more. Ryan from the Shug. He's got one for each team. I'll rapid fire these because I'm hungry. Say the Texans rushed 30 times against the Colts in week 1. As of right now, who are you giving those carries to in the offense? All right, so if they run the ball 30 times, it means they're probably ahead in the second half. I would say 18 carries for Joe Mixon, 8 carries for Cam Akers, 1 end around with Stephon Diggs, another handoff to Andrew Beckett, fullback. That's 28. And then 2 kneel downs for CJ Stroud to kill the clock in a Texans victory. How's that? Astros, what are your thoughts on the Kikuchi trade? This is Ryan from the Shug asking me. I didn't like it one bit at the time, but he's played well. I didn't realize he was top 5 in the AL strikeouts this year and top 15 across MLB. He strikes guys out. There's no doubt about that. He's got some power stuff. I like it so far. It's hard not to like it. My most encouraging thing with Kikuchi, and I knew very little about him before he got here, but I like the way he handled that game last night where the Astros just weren't doing him any favors. They were creating a lot of traffic on the bases with all those errors that they were making, and Kikuchi was a cool customer, man. So I like that. The trade so far so good, and I was critical not because I was emotionally attached to Joey Loperfido or Jake Bloss or Will Wagner, but just because empirically you were giving up a lot more than what you would normally have to give up to get a guy with Kikuchi's track record. But as Dana Brown pointed out, that was a market. So I like it now. And who knows, maybe they bring Kikuchi back. He's a free agent after this year, but he really seems to like it here. So maybe they bring him back. Rockets question, how many years do you think it'll take the Rockets to become as relevant as the Astros and Texans are in the city right now? Things are about to get real fun in the next month with regular season and the playoffs. Thanks for the great content. You're welcome, Ryan. The Rockets, I think the Rockets, I think there's a possibility, if we're saying as relevant, if the Texans are good and the Astros are good, the Rockets could be good and not be as relevant as the Astros or Texans, just because I think that's where basketball falls in the tapestry of this town. It's no disrespect to the Rockets. I just think it's a fact of life here in Houston. But as far as getting the Rockets to where people are super duper excited and the Toyota Center is full, damn, I should have. While Vanessa was walking down the front hallway of my apartment, I should have brought her in here and sat her down and interviewed her about this. I would say, let me put it this way. They were 41-41 last year. They almost made the play-in. So they were bordering on relevance already. I think they're going to be better this year than they were last year. I think they're going to be an above 500 team this coming season. And I think they're probably like another year away from being a factor in the Western Conference, like a real factor where the upper tippy top teams in the Western Conference get nervous about playing them in a best of 7 series, that kind of thing. So I'll say the 2025-2026 season. But the uphill climb for the Rockets is just that the Texans are back to being super popular, and the Astros, until they stop being a playoff team, are going to continue to be really, really popular. So, but those Rockets teams with James Harden making the playoffs, I mean, they were, those were fun times. That was relevant Rocket basketball. So it's in there somewhere, man. They just this young core starts to need to come through. I love Reed Shepherd. I think that pick is going to be, that was a gift from heaven, because I don't think the Rockets were counting on any more really high picks in the draft. But that Brooklyn pick popping up at 3 and you get Reed Shepherd with that, he might wind up being the best out of all these guys. And I'm including Şengün in that. So appreciate the questions. Texans fan Jay would have preferred to chat, but was cool interacting with you from the sidewalk at the pregame. Yeah, Jay, appreciate you shouting out. Thanks for the club level seats. You won them during my show on Sports Radio 610. They were great. Awesome, dude. Appreciate that. Appreciate you listening. Keep in mind, if you're listening to the podcast, this goes for all of you. Weekends of home games, Texans Ticket Tuesday. All right. So week 2 will be the first or the next one of those. We did one today. Anyway, Texan fan Jay says, does it look like Mixon is going to be back for week 1? It looks like our first string lines have a problem running the ball on offense and stopping the run on defense. Am I worrying about nothing since our starting lines haven't been out there together? I think the defense is going to be fine. I'm concerned about the offensive line run blocking. I'm not concerned about Joe Mixon playing in week 1. Those are my concern levels right now. Almost zero concern about Joe Mixon. Slightly above zero concern about the defensive line stopping the run, although getting Christian Harris back with the linebackers would help. And then I've got big concern about being able to run the ball, period, on offense because of the offensive line. All right, last one, Derwin and Cypress. When the Texans went empty on the 1-yard line, CJ seemed to have like 12 options to throw to. What and how do you think defenses in the league will adjust to so many weapons moving forward? I don't know. I don't know what the adjustment is because as long as all these guys are on the field, whatever adjustment you make opens something else. It's like whack-a-mole. You knock this mole down and the other one pops up, you know. Like you put your hand over a leak in the dike and another leak pops up. On the particular play you're talking about, Derwin, the defensive backs and safeties are all dropped way back because they're not wanting to get beat over the top. And now you got all this space in the intermediate part of the field for Dalton Schultz to just run free. And again, you got CJ Stroud pulling the trigger, who even in the back of his own end zone navigates a cluttered pocket as good or better than almost every other quarterback in football. So if I knew what the adjustments were, I would be a defensive coordinator in the NFL. I have no idea what you do to defend this team. And that's what I love about it. What do you think the running back room looks like? Dameon Pierce or no Dameon Pierce? No, man. They really like him. If it were me, it would be no Dameon Pierce, but I think there might be Dameon Pierce. Again, the big tell is going to be Dameon playing in this game on Saturday. If he's playing in the Rams game, it means he's battling for his job. But I think if he has a good game against the Rams, even though it'll be against second and third stringers, I think they're going to keep him. I'll put it this way. If they were to cut him, he's going to get picked up by somebody pretty quickly. That's why I think a trade is the most likely scenario for Dameon. How many tight ends? They seem to really like both Brevin and Stover. Well, Stover was a lock to make the team. 4th-round pick, and they love him. They love Brevin, too. D'Amico Ryans really likes Brevin Jordan, and Dalton Schultz is obviously your starter. I think there's going to be 3 tight ends. I don't think Tegan Catoriano makes it. Just can't stay healthy. So now maybe there's another tight end that gets let go by another team out there in waivers, and they pick that up. But as far as the guys in this room on this team, I think Dalton Keene is gone. I think Tegan Catoriano gets waived, and I think it'll be 3 tight ends. All right, jumbo mailbag today, man. You guys did good. Appreciate you. Reminder, you can see it at the bottom of the screen, HOU mailbag. It's me ripping up the mailbag. HOU mailbag at gmail.com. We'll be back with a preview for the Rams and the Texans later this week. Things to watch for. It'll be mostly about position battles, not really matchups with the Rams third stringers, but it'll be about position battles. I'll have 2 practice reports this week as well, one tomorrow and one Thursday. Thursday in particular is after the joint practice, so make sure you listen to all of them, but that one especially will be about the joint practice. So that's what we got going on the rest of the week. I'll do a recap of the Rams game as well over the weekend. So for my producer, Anthony Irwin, big thanks to all of you for listening. Big thanks to Anthony for getting the podcast out to you. We are out of time. Subscribe, rate, and review the podcast as well. We appreciate that. Until later this week, until tomorrow after practice, this has been the Utopia Football Podcast.